Joe Crowley is one of the most powerful Democrats in the House. He's considered the number 4 Democrat. He raised a ton of money. We're going to talk a lot about that here. And, you know, normally I say with people, they're usually nice people in real life. The problem is the systemic corruption. And I've met Joe Crowley once or twice. He seemed perfectly pleasant in person for the 90 seconds or so that I talked to him. In his case, the corruption goes so deep, I do question that, but it's not important because it isn't about the personalities, it isn't about the people. It's about the system and systemic corruption that's in it. And this story is about Crowley and now his new primary opponent, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and what an interesting race she's made this. He represents the Queens and the Bronx, barely. That's his district. Whether he actually represents them is a different question, one we're going to tackle here. But this story is larger than that. This is an interesting story about how politics works overall. And Intercept did a great job with this. Ida Chavez and Ryan Grimm working on it. So they explain that, as everybody knows, Crowley is considered the party boss in Queens. So he holds a lot of power in that district. So we're going to show you how he used that power in a second. But first, let's go back to 2008. The financial collapse had happened, and Joe Crowley was one of the Democrats who orchestrated the bailout for the bankers. Now, those same bankers happened to be his donors, but once again, we were assured that that was a coincidence. A little bit of a problem here because, as Chavez and Grimm point out, Crowley found himself caught up in an ethics probe, having taken campaign money from lobbyists representing financial firms just before voting against imposing tougher restrictions on financial firms on Wall Street. Now, he was cleared. My guess as to how those proceedings went is, hey, do we all take money from the bankers? Yep. Do we all do whatever they ask of us? Yep, yep, okay. All right, well then we are adjourned. You're free to go, Joe. And they're right that he can take money from those companies. Those bribes are now called donations, and they're called independent expenditures, and the Supreme Court made them legal. You and I know exactly what they are. You think Wall Street banks give to politicians because of charity? No. Those banks know that guys like Joe Crowley are now their basically unofficial employees. We give you the money, and you do as you are told, boy. And that's what the Republicans do. That's Paul Ryan is their biggest boy they have in Congress. A smart guy with the budget. No, what did he do with the budget? He destroyed the budget. The only thing he ever did was give a giant tax cut to the rich as he was ordered. So Crowley takes his orders and does as he is told. When the New York Daily News reported on the unfolding scandal, the scandal back in 2008, it noted that Crowley, when he was first elected, relied heavily on labor union money, but had since shifted to Wall Street cash. Here's his quote. I love this quote. I think I've matured here, both personally and in terms of my assignments, Crowley explained at the time. Oh, that's what we call it. So when you start taking Wall Street cash, that's called maturing, okay? And then here's another great quote from Crowley. He said, many people here in Washington view me as an important figure. Well, isn't that grand? And that's true. They do view him as an important figure. They're like, that's the money guy. That's Mr. Moneybags. He's in New York. He goes to Wall Street, takes all their money, says, yes, sir, absolutely, sir. For example, today, a bunch of Democrats voted with the Republicans to roll back Dodd-Frank and to let the banks run wild again. Who's the person who funneled that money to those Democrats? Joe Crowley. In fact, we're going to explain that in a second. So who are his donors today? Crowley's second biggest donor, the Blackstone Group, is a close ally of President Donald Trump. Funny, it seems like we're told by the Democrats that those are two wildly different parties, but they seem to have the same donors who want the same things. And by the way, the donors always get what they want. And the Republicans say, yeah, we delivered for the donors. And the Democrats go, oh, sorry, I guess there was nothing we could do. Well, you could have voted against rolling back financial regulation, but you didn't do that. You could have voted against the bailouts, but you didn't do that. You were the top cheerleader for the bailouts. Okay, so let's explain how this game is played. Again, to the Intercept. At the time, Crowley was the vice chair of finance at the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. His fundraising generosity, a way to win the favor of colleagues and rise in the ranks, He's been on a steady climb since and has only gotten better at hauling in cash. So far this campaign season, Crowley has raised $2.8 million and has $1.6 million cash on hand, according to the Federal Elections Commission's filing. That is a ton of money. Do you have any idea how hard it is to raise money from small donors? You get a ton of individual donors, but man, getting up to $1 million is an enormous challenge. But if you go over to Wall Street with a giant bag, duffel bag, you go, here, give me $2.8 million. They're like, you're gonna give me a tax cut that gives me $2.8 trillion? Yes, sir, I am, sir. Okay, great, here's your $2.8 million. Super easy. Why wouldn't I do that? That's an amazing return on investment, right? And would you buy just Republicans? No, you'd buy Democrats too to assure victory. Makes sense, and if you're gonna buy Democrats, you go to Joe Crowley. Now, what's the second half of that? Now, the chair of the House Democratic Caucus, he has spent much of 2017 and 2018 doling out checks to moderate and conservative Democratic candidates around the country. Part of a behind-the-scenes bid to be in a position to replace House Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi if she's ousted by her colleagues after the November elections. And what would be the result of that ouster? We would get someone just like Nancy Pelosi. Behind door number 2 is another person serving Wall Street and the donor class. Well, what's the point of door number 2? And the most important part of that was where he funnels the money. Takes the money from Wall Street and gives a lot of it to conservative Democrats and so-called moderate Democrats. Oh, they got tough races. Oh, that's there in purple states and red states, and they got to win. That's their excuse. It's a logical one, but it's an excuse. And what do those conservative Democrats do? Well, they were just with Donald Trump celebrating today. Yes, we voted against the people and for the big banks. Funny, it looks like the money from the big banks went to Joe Crowley, then to those conservative Democrats who now brag that they voted with the big banks. But I'm sure that if you live in Washington, and I mean, I can't even call them stupid, they're purposely blind to it, they don't want to see it because it's uncomfortable, you say that's not corruption. Are you saying that the honorable gentleman from the Queens is part of this systemic corruption and is actually serving the big banks? Yes, that is precisely what I am saying, in case it wasn't clear enough. Now, another person who's for the big banks and is making all of his money from the banks is Mike Bloomberg, former mayor of New York. He's also the guy who did stop and frisk. Now, Queens and Bronx is largely minority. It has Rikers Island, a terrible, terrible prison with horrible abuses, and almost all those abuses go towards minorities. Has Joe Crowley fought for his citizens in Queens and Bronx, maybe try to shut down Rikers Island, which is in his district? By the way, there's a whole movement to shut down Rikers Island. Is Joe Crowley part of it? No. So when he goes to Bloomberg, is he gonna let him hear it about stop and frisk because it mainly affects his constituents in the Queens and Bronx? No. Guess what he's gonna do? You're gonna be shocked. He's going to raise money with Mike Bloomberg. And he did. He raised a lot of it. So here's a description from his opponent, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. So we got the guy who created stop and frisk, who's paying the representative of Rikers Island to continue this racket of incarcerating black and brown people in New York City. It is a racket indeed. Now, let me show you Alexandria. She's running this campaign. And I want to be clear here. We're honest in our reporting. I had nothing to do with this report at The Intercept. They're a different group. But I do support Alexandria. She's a Just Democrat. That's a group that I helped to start. I think she's a wonderful candidate from that district. And I do not believe that Crowley is a wonderful candidate. And why? Did I pull it out of the thin air? Is it personal? Not remotely. It's because of this. He is a huge part of the system of corruption. She is looking to overthrow that system of corruption. So she wants to break the wheel, if you will. She is uncorrupted, does not take any corporate PAC money. So, in fact, let's compare their donors, okay? Nearly 75% of Ocasio-Cortez's donations are small individual contributions. Those are the ones that are under $200. While less than 1% of Crowley's funds are small donations, according to Open Secrets. Why? Like other establishment Democrats like Dianne Feinstein, they don't bother taking your money. Like, look, we're not gonna serve you. And what are you gonna give me? $27? I'm not interested. I'm gonna go to a Bloomberg get together. I'm gonna have $2,700 per person. There's gonna be hundreds of people there. Easy money. I'm going to go to Wall Street. They're going to give me millions. They're going to put it into our PACs at tens of millions, sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars. You're $27. That's why Crowley doesn't even bother trying to get money from you. Less than 1% of his donations. As someone on the show, another host said very accurately, look, everyone represents their donors. The difference is for Ocasio-Cortez, her donors are you guys. For Crowley, his donors are Wall Street. So take your pick. And that is a decision they're going to have to make soon in New York. This primary is coming up. So, but before we get there, I want to tell you part of the reason Ocasio-Cortez is in this race in the first place, because she suffered an injustice, her family did, that it turns out, in a funny and tragic turn of events, is somewhat connected to Joe Crowley. So I want to tell you how power works at the local level now. New York Daily News, in this case, explains for 30 years, the same three men have effectively controlled one of the largest Democratic organizations in America. They are Gerard Sweeney, Michael Reich, and Frank Boltz, the powerful attorneys who serve Representative Joe Crowley, the chairman of the Queens County Democratic Party. Okay, so those three lawyers serve Crowley. Well, what do? Well, let's go to the New York Times now. And they explain a particular court in Queens. They say that is where you find the Surrogates Court, otherwise known as Widows and Orphans Court. This court appoints guardians who make handsome fees processing the estates of those Queens residents who die without wills. To enter this court is to stumble upon a Ponce de Leon's own spring, an eternal source of easy money for the politically wired. Well, as it turns out, one of the families that stumbled upon that was Ocasio-Cortez's. Her father passed away suddenly and did not have a will. So they go to this surrogate court, and they think that that court is going to help them. No. It took 4 brutal years to make it through that court. All along, the attorney fees are piling up and piling up and piling up. Oh, your dad left an estate, such as it was? No, we're going to take more and more of that and less for you. Meanwhile, they have bills to pay. They were so close to foreclosure that Ocasio-Cortez explains that bankers or whoever was doing the processing for them literally came up and started taking pictures of their house because they were going to sell their house. So, well, how much money do Crowley's allies make from this? Well, we go back to The Intercept here. Sweeney's office, according to the Daily News, made $30 million as counsel to the public administrator of the court from 2006 to 2017, administering the estates of people who died without will. $30 million over about a 12-year period. That is a ton of money. And that money is the thing that greases a lot of these operations. So another one now, Scott Kaufman, who served as Crowley's campaign treasurer for 17 years, made almost $500,000 from assignments by the court from 2006 to 2017. The New York Post reported last June. Kaufman's haul prompted a state probe into possible pay violations. But Crowley and his cronies somehow always survive the probes. Hey, this looks unethical. No, don't worry. It'll go to our like-minded friends where they'll decide, no, high five, keep taking the money. So, since then, Ocasio-Cortez has entered this race. And they eventually did get through that court, like I said, in 4 years. And she saw not just that injustice, but injustice after injustice in her district and said, you know what? We can't wait for a knight in shining armor. I'm going to mount up. I'm going to do it, okay? And she has organized hundreds of volunteers. They thought they were going to knock her out of the race. Crowley does legal tricks every time. You need 1,250 signatures. That's a lot, but you have to do more than that because they do legal challenges, and the courts are also run by the same racket. So they thought they were going to be cute about that. So Ocasio-Cortez didn't get 1,250 signatures. She got 5,000 signatures. How do you like them apples? Okay. So then she started doing all these progressive proposals like Medicare for All. She fought for that. The rest of the Justice Democrats fought for that. Over 70 congressmen flipped on Medicare for All, including Joe Crowley. So Intercept explains, with Ocasio-Cortez giving him a real challenge from the left, Crowley came out and endorsed Medicare for All. He did that 2 weeks into this run. Now, Crowley's people say, oh, no. She's not making him any more progressive. He's always been a progressive advocate. Really? He had years upon years to sign up as a co-sponsor for Medicare for All. How come he didn't take that time? He had years to funnel money to progressive candidates instead of conservative candidates. How come he didn't do it? He had years to fight against money in politics, for example, and say, you know what, this is systemic corruption. We should have public financing of elections. He hasn't done that yet either. Okay, he's not interested in any of that stuff because he gains from the corruption. And after she forces him to sign up for Medicare for All, super obvious, he's like, oh, no, we were always in favor of it. Then why didn't you sign up before? Because you were not in favor of it. In fact, you're not in favor of it now. And Ocasio-Cortez explains that too. Crowley's financial interests, she maintained, are, quote, at odds with everything that this community needs. So you can't really trust his recent policy shifts to be anything deeper than face value, anything deeper than a re-election bid. Do you really think if you live in Queens or the Bronx that Joe Crowley after the election is like, you know what? I'm not going to represent Wall Street interests anymore. I'm going to fight like hell for Medicare for All. No, he's going to do nothing. And then when the Republicans win again, he's going to say, oh, well, there was nothing we could do. Now, there is something you could do, which is go vote. You should go vote in all of these elections. Primaries are even more important than general elections. Actually pick a candidate that represents you. We will have links to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez down below in the description box on YouTube or Facebook, but you make up your own mind. Do your research. You like a candidate, back that candidate. It's different than a Just Democrat. Have at it, Hoss. Look into all the progressive groups or any group you like. But most importantly, take your government back. Get the power back. Be in charge. And the way you do that is by voting. End the corruption. Young Turks. 2 easy ways to follow the Young Turks. One is hit the subscribe button down below. Then you're a TYT subscriber. And second is ring the bell. And when you do that on YouTube, you're notified of our videos.